All right, Adam, game week again, and the Buffs are back home for homecoming. They got the Arizona State Sun Devils coming in here, and boy, Arizona State's not a very good football team, yet they're almost 2 touchdown favorites, which tells you a lot about how this team has played this year. The Buffs 1-6, Arizona State 2-5. The winner, they're both 1-3 in the conference, so the winner can get a leg up on the other in the conference. Obviously, a big one if the Buffs are going to win a second game. This is probably it.
Yeah, it's the interim bowl here at Folsom Field. We were chatting before practice ended today. I don't know, have 2 interim head coaches gone head-to-head in a game in October before? I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin to do the research on that, but it's a pretty rare set of circumstances. Both teams don't know, at least at the recording of this, who's going to be starting a quarterback for them this week. So a lot of questions. Mike Sanford had a good reminder on Tuesday of this is still important. There's a lot of 5th and 6th year seniors that this is getting close to the end for them, and there's only 3 more games here at Folsom Field, and so it's still important. I'm sure there's a lot of Colorado fans that have probably checked out at this point. Maybe they got reinvigorated a little bit with the Cal win, and then based on what happened in Corvallis last week, maybe lost interest again. But it's homecoming game, so you'd think there'll be still a decent crowd, probably not anywhere close to what we saw for the family weekend, which just draws a lot of people to Folsom Field. So I'm still excited to go back to Folsom Field and cover this game. But, there's not going to be a lot of eyeballs across the nation on this football game.
Well, it's not on the Pac-12 network, so there could be more eyeballs on it than normal. ESPNU, yeah. But you're right. I mean, and Mike Sanford, this week he started things off and kind of, said, "Hey, Buff Nation, we need you out there," and you understand why he's doing that. And of course, it was an unbelievable atmosphere 2 weeks ago for Cal. They want to recreate that, and I think that if they can recreate that, I think that gives them a better shot at winning this football game. And so, obviously, Mike Sanford's going to do that, and you have to like the energy of Mike Sanford. And if you're a Buff fan, support these kids, I guess. But I'm not trying to, promote this game for CU. But I can understand why CU wants. Let's get that type of atmosphere again. That was kind of fun, and that's the way they're going to win this football game is if they can get that kind of atmosphere to generate the energy that they need to beat a team that is probably just a little above their level, but not that much.
Yeah. I tortured myself, and I went back and watched the Oregon State game. And Oregon it really is a good football team. Yeah. And Colorado did really shoot themselves in the foot. We go back to the fact that the talent level in this program is not where it needs to be, but it's where it can be to get a few wins this football season. It can beat an Arizona State here. It's a hard game to handicap. We'll get into our predictions later, but I felt like more like they were shooting themselves in the foot. They were doing that early in the season, but it still looked like this team is on the cusp of having one Saturday where they really put it together, even more so than that Cal win. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen this Saturday, but it's possible. I'm not going to pick them to win this week, but this football team still has the ability to go get a couple more wins.
Yeah, that's the thing. You talk about shooting themselves in the foot, and there's so many plays, and Mike Sanford mentioned it, but the third play of the game, Jordan Tyson's running open down the middle of the field, and the throw was off. That could have been a touchdown. The first play for Oregon State, they fumble. CU gets the ball, great field position, but then they fumble themselves. So it's things like that there were opportunities. I don't know if they probably don't win that game, but maybe you're in it and you play better football. And I think, to Mike Sanford's point, they're not good enough at this point to overcome those mistakes. I mean, their margin for error is so thin because, like you said, the talent level is to the point you can beat an Arizona State, you can beat a Cal, but it's at that point that you're such a razor-thin margin of error. You can't make mistakes if you're going to stay with an Oregon State. You probably can't make a lot of mistakes if you're going to stay with ASU this week.
Well, share the stat that you had in terms of the drops this year, in terms of how that compares across the conference, because that really spells out, the biggest issue in terms of them shooting themselves in the foot this year.
Yeah, 19 drops according to Pro Football Focus, which You and I said, hey, it seems like more than that.
Yeah.
But 19 drops is quite a lot. I mean, that's, what is that, almost 3 a game. That ranks third in the conference, but the two that are ahead of them, Washington and Arizona, are the two teams that have thrown the most passes in the conference. CU's thrown, I think, the second lowest number of passes. So they've got a higher percentage of drops than anybody in the conference. And that kills them, and we saw it. They won the Cal game, obviously, but we saw it the very first play of the Cal game. We saw it. There was a sequence right before halftime. Oregon State, they're down 21-3, but it was 2 consecutive drops on a third down and a fourth down that if you get either one of those, you're inside the red zone, and maybe you score right before halftime, and maybe it's 21-10. You don't win the football game probably, but at least you're in it. And so it's things like that. It's drops and just those self-inflicted wounds that this team does, more than most buff teams that I've seen in recent years.
Yeah, and when you're struggling early in the game, it's so important. You're talking about 18 to 22-year-old young men that can ride waves of momentum either way.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the first offensive play against Cal, Arias, that would have been a touchdown.
Yeah.
This wasn't a drop, but the first drive at Oregon State, JT Shrout doesn't throw the ball where he needs to. And you don't think they're going to necessarily beat the Beavers on the road if they complete that pass, but maybe it would have looked a little bit differently if you get some of that early momentum that they just haven't been able to seize on offensively.
Yeah, it changes the complexion of games for sure. And if you're scoring a touchdown on the third play of the game in Corvallis with a 70-yard bomb or whatever, now all of a sudden, imagine the energy on that sideline. In a place like that was very loud for only having half of a stadium. You and I know it was very, very loud, but it changes things if you can get that completion and score that touchdown early. Again, maybe you don't win the game, but you stay in it long for a while. And maybe you lose it 31-27, and you can feel pretty good about that. The Buffs have got to start strong this week. I think that's just the key for this team. I think the confidence is so fragile on this team that you better start strong or else you're not going to win a football game.
And it's an interesting quarterback situation now because we don't know if Owen McCown is going to be back this week. Mike Sanford said on Tuesday that at that point he wasn't ready to start a football game.
Yeah.
And so if he's not ready to go this week and you go with JT Shrout, I'm not trying to just pick on him, but it didn't look pretty last week. He misfired on a lot of throws, and for once there wasn't an excuse there. The weather was just fine. It was a little chilly, but nothing that should limit your performance as a quarterback. And so
it's going to be chilly most of the time in October and November games, right?
Yeah. So what if Owen McCown doesn't start on Saturday? He's played in 4 games this year. You've got a murderous stretch coming up. Do you at that point just sit him and redshirt him? At that point, I don't know. If you make that decision to sit him in redshirt, then I think the ceiling of this offense is limited. So it could potentially pose a really challenging question for this coaching staff and for as much as they let Owen McCown and his family into that decision.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a discussion we'll have next week to see if Owen plays or not. But with JT Shrout, it's interesting. He's been pretty good in his relief appearances, but his starts have not been very sharp. And so maybe they start Drew Carter. If Owen's not available, start Drew Carter for the first series, and then bring JT in and say, all right, this is a relief appearance. Just go do your thing now. So because he looked good against Cal, looked good against TCU, and threw touchdowns in both those games and looked fairly decent. But
I guess the one thing with him too is that he has not started a football game at Folsom Field. He came in relief in the TCU game, but he hasn't. His starts have been on the road. So I guess if you're trying to hang on to any semblance of optimism in terms of, hey, maybe if JT starts at Folsom Field and they make a couple plays early on, it could look differently. But he hasn't put the product out there to predict that to happen. That's
true, and those relief appearances were at Folsom. So maybe he just plays better at Folsom.
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll see a good JT Shrout this week if he starts against ASU. So should we get into predictions?
Sure. Yeah. Mentioned that, there's a quarterback competition going on down in Tempe this week, and their interim head coach said he's going to take more of the role in terms of calling plays this week. Well, he was promoted from the running backs coach role. So I found that to be a little interesting without the benefit of a bye week, which Mike Sanford said is really beneficial if you're going to make a lot of changes. They don't have that. So I can't imagine, I can't imagine that I'd be too nervous about Arizona State, putting up a ton of points in this football game. Yeah. I think this is maybe what the doctor ordered for Gerald Chapman and that defense to kind of get back on track and get things back there. but I can't do it. I can't pick a Colorado win at this point. So I'm going to predict a lower scoring game. I think the 13.5 point spread for Arizona State's pretty large. This is a Colorado team that, by and large, even in struggling seasons, has played pretty competitive football here at Folsom Field. I know that they got blown out once earlier this season, and it didn't go well in the second half against TCU, but generally this team plays with the pulse here in Boulder. So I'd be surprised if ASU wins by 2 or more touchdowns. So I'm going to say the Sun Devils find a way to eke this one out, 21-17.
The Buffs are also usually, to me, seems like traditionally they're better at night games in Folsom as well. There's some better energy in that regard. So, and this is a 5:30 start, so maybe they play better in that regard. I'm gonna go on a limb and pick the Buffs in this one. I did 2 weeks ago against Cal. I don't like ASU, like you said, putting up a lot of points with all their issues going on offensively. I think Emory Jones has played well at times, but who knows if he's going to be their guy or not. Trenton Bourget, I think is his name, has only played in 1 game, but he led them off the bench to a win against Washington. So we'll see in that regard. I do think this is maybe an opportunity for Gerald Chapman's defense to get well a little bit. If Owen McCown plays, I feel a little bit better about the offense, but maybe there's something to JT playing at Folsom Field, and so I'm going to say that Colorado ekes this one out, and I'll go Buffs 24-21. Get a season high points.
All right. Well, this is going to determine who's better with their predictions this year, I think, because you're right on the Cal game. I couldn't quite jump on board there, but your optimism paid off then. Maybe it will pay off again. We'll see.
Again, I just want to cover a victory because it gets old covering these blowout losses. So some of it's optimism, but we'll see. Adam and I will be back after the game to talk about it.